Okay, here we go. So everyone should have something that looks like this open, all right? So a couple classes ago, we kind of went through the basics of InDesign, okay? So, and I promise you that probably left lots of questions on everyone's mind, because everyone has probably ran into problems with not knowing what to do next. So we'll start to solve all of those problems starting today. Okay, so as exercise 10 demonstrates, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating an album cover. Okay, so everyone here knows what an album cover looks like and probably has some ideas in mind on what you might do. Okay, so part of what that process is going to be is, one, selecting a background from your album cover. You can find that background on various websites. So you can go on Creative Commons. A lot of my backgrounds that I'll actually use today were all found on Creative Commons. You can make the background if you want. So if you want to go on Photoshop and actually create the background, you can do that. And then ideally, you're going to want to bring in some type of masked image. Okay, so for example, if I'm doing Luke Bryan. Okay, if I'm doing Luke Bryan, maybe, well, I'm not going to use this background, but ultimately I want maybe him from that image. I'm going to place him into another image, okay? Or whatever you might want. So whether it be a person, whether it be an object, ideally that process should be spending some time masking out an image to bring into another. So this will actually link back to Photoshop a little bit. We'll actually continue to use it, so you'll continue to use your masking skills. And how real your album cover looks will come down to how good you are at masking certain objects, okay? So I typically see all kinds of stuff, whether it be, there's usually always fire in one of these album covers. I know I've already seen some fire being masked. Fire is actually a really tough one to mask. I will admit to that. So I'm curious to see how good you actually do that. So think about what we talked about last class, because some of those things will help you. But your end result should be a combination of a few of those steps. Along with, we'll use the text tool in InDesign, and we'll look at how to export our projects. Okay, so we'll touch a little bit on some of the things that we talked about last week, but we'll also learn some new things as well. Okay, in terms of what your album cover is composed of, completely up to you. I don't care what you do, as long as it's appropriate. Remember that other people will be doing peer reviews of this, so just make sure it's appropriate for other people to view. Okay, so let's get started. So everyone should have this screen right here. What we're going to click on is we are going to click on Document. Okay, and from here, everyone should be kind of familiar with this next step. We're going to uncheck the Facing Pages button. All right. We'll talk about what Facing Pages is really used for once we get closer to working on our portfolio. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the page size. As I mentioned last time we were talking about this, you're going to notice that InDesign naturally uses a unit of measurement called picas. Picas is, I figured out what it was actually equivalent to in terms of inches. I'll bet you someone here can figure it out here by the time I'm done talking. But yes, there is actually a formula to converting it to inches, but it's a unit of measurement that a lot of graphic designers do and people that are in publication use. It's a really fine-tuned unit of measurement. Luckily, we have the ability to change that really easily for what it is that we're doing. But you'll notice pica is being used very frequently in InDesign. But luckily, if you actually just click on the width or the height and you just type in something like 12 inches or 8 inches, it will convert it to picas automatically. So you can type in whatever unit of measurement you want, it'll just convert it to what it knows best, okay? So today we're gonna be creating an album cover. I think that's like 4.5 inches, or maybe it's 5 inches by 5 inches. Luckily, there is a preset for compact disc. I guess we're still making CDs these days, but I'm sure that probably won't be an option for much longer. But luckily there is an option for compact disc. So we're gonna go ahead and select compact disc. That will automatically convert the unit of measurements accordingly. Okay, down below where it says margins, we're gonna go ahead and change all of this to 0, okay? Because when you create an album cover, there's never going to be really a margin. You're always going to your graphics and whatever it is that you're putting on your album cover will always flow right to the edge of the canvas. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and type in 0 for all of these, and right next to where it says top and bottom, you're going to notice this little, what looks like a chain link. That chain link just keeps all of these margins linked. Okay, so notice that when I changed the top to 0, it changed all of them to 0. Most of the time that's what I want to do, but sometimes, like, actually, if you're creating something like a book, you're probably going to want to actually unclick that so that you can actually create inner margins, outer margins, top and bottom margins, etc. Okay, so, and we'll face some, once we actually start the portfolio, we'll actually want to adjust that accordingly. But for now, all zeros is just fine. All right, so we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And here we will have our canvas for creating our album cover. So before we actually dive into some of these different things, let's kind of talk about what InDesign is kind of used for. So InDesign is not so much for creating new content. InDesign is more of a program used to lay out existing content. Okay, so most of the time, the things that you're creating in InDesign is composed of various things that you've already created. Okay, so today, for example, you're creating an album cover where you already have a background image. You're going to create an image to which you're going to drop in, and then you're going to add things like text and line work to, kind of make it pop and make it more interesting and dynamic. Okay, so a majority of what you're creating is going to be from objects that were created or elsewhere. Okay, but ultimately you are creating a new layout for something. Okay, today we're doing an album cover, but most of the time I do things like presentations, I do architectural design packages, I do you might do magazines, you might do books, we're going to do other various forms of graphic design, etc. There's lots of different uses for InDesign. Okay, but how does all that stuff kind of come together and work in the world of InDesign? So InDesign works really well for really large multi-page spreads. Okay, people, for example, like I'm just going to say ESPN, the magazine. So you're creating a magazine, and that magazine is 100 pages, okay, or whatever it is. Okay, InDesign works really well because it allows you to create really easy multi-page spreads, and InDesign does that through a series of links. Okay, how InDesign works is that when you bring an image from an outside source and you place it into your program, it always shows you kind of a dumbed down version of what that image is. Okay, you'll notice a lot when you import an image, it always kind of shows a kind of a pixelized version of it. Okay, and if that's the case, don't be alarmed by it at all. We'll actually talk about how to fix that today and how to work around it. But what it's doing is it's not unlike Photoshop, whereas when you bring in an image in Photoshop, it just continues to compile, and that file size gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because those images are actually housed inside the file that you're working on. Well, InDesign's a little bit different in that it actually stores all of the files in other locations. Okay, so with that said, it's really important that all of the imagery that you bring into what we do today and into InDesign files in the future, that you always have access to those. So if I place a background image or if I place a couple images in my file today and I save it, and I open it up on my home computer a week later, if I don't have maybe my thumb drive where those images are originally stored, it's not going to show you any of the content. So it always refers to the file somewhere else. So all of that data is being stored at an external location. That allows you to keep the file size, an InDesign file size, really small. Okay, and it allows you to do 100-page spreads without the software like bogging down and not being able to compose itself. Okay, so it uses the idea of links. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in the future. Okay, But let's go through and let's actually just touch base a little bit more on how the software works and the different layout and where all these tools are. So you're probably now familiar with our upper contextual ribbon. Okay, the contextual ribbon is going to be the horizontal ribbon up here at the top. Just like Photoshop, when you click on different tools here on the left, the contextual ribbon will consistently change with options that allow you to further explore the tool that you are actually using. Okay, so there's usually a tool, and then there are 20 different ways to use it. So that's what that contextual ribbon is for. Okay, and then just like Photoshop, you have things like layers, you have things like links, and so on and so forth. And we'll actually go through and continue to explore all these today and in further classes. Okay. So earlier I talked about links. All right. So if you click on links right now, we have nothing in this file. But we'll come back to this here in just a second once I actually put a file in there, and we'll see how that works. Just like Photoshop, we also have a thing called layers. Okay, unlike Photoshop, when you start to accumulate different files and different shapes and different things inside Photoshop, all of those are individual links. So the difference between InDesign and Photoshop is that you can actually start to group your layers. Okay, you can have a layer for all of your text. You can have a layer for all of your background images. You can have a layer for, layers for various things. So it starts to allow you to kind of create groups and subgroupings of all of your different layers. Okay, and we'll talk about kind of what all of these little things mean here in just a second once I bring in our first object. Okay, today we're going to focus on the selection tools, both the regular selection tool and the direct selection tool. We'll also look at text a little bit more in depth today, and we're going to look at the idea of using frames. Okay, so last class when we were the last class that we were talking about importing objects into InDesign, some of you guys probably ran into problems where you brought in an image and it was like either teeny tiny or it was really big, and that probably ended up turning into a frustrating time. Okay, well sometimes that works really well, sometimes it doesn't, and frames will help you do that. Okay, so let's look at how frames might work relating to what it is, or relating it to creating the album cover. Before I do that though, let's right click up here on our rulers. Okay, from there I can actually change it to whatever unit of measurements that I want. You can either do it both on the top or on the side. You can also right click here on the corner, and if I change that to inches, it will actually change both of them. Okay, I can't really imagine a scenario where maybe you want picas on the top and inches on the left, so usually going to the corner works pretty well. I would also save this right now. You'll figure out that InDesign is kind of buggy sometimes, and no matter what version I use, it always seems to be a little bit buggy. So save consistently so you guys don't use your work. All right, save it to your thumb drive as well. All right, so I'm going to go to my class, Fall 2017. Today's class, I'm going to call this album cover. Okay, for those of you that are using both InDesign CC at home, so you're using the Creative Cloud version, and you're using this version here, you're going to want to down save your files to an IDML file that allows you to go back and forth between multiple different versions of InDesign. Unfortunately, I don't know why. Photoshop's great. You can open up any version of Photoshop and it usually always reads everything just fine. But InDesign is just fussy. It doesn't like going back and forth between the different versions. So if you use both the Creative Cloud and the software here at school, which is like 2 or 3 years old, you're going to want to save as an IDML file. Okay, so IDML. I'm going to call this album cover, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. All right, now we're ready to go. So from here, I'm going to click on this little button right here that is a frame. Okay, what a frame does, it ultimately is it's kind of a stand-in for a future image. Okay, a future image or future text. All right, so if you know you're going to be placing kind of multiple images on your on your spread, it's great to use frames to start to kind of block out where those images might be, okay? For what we're doing today, it's fairly simple. We're gonna have one large background image, okay? So I'm gonna start by creating that frame from one corner of my album cover to the other, okay? And I will go ahead and let that go. You'll notice that when you're doing that, you'll notice, especially if you have other images within inside your spread, InDesign is really nice at kind of snapping to other objects in your spread. Okay, so for example, if I start right here in the corner and I start to drag that down, you'll notice that right there, it actually snapped to the center line of where I'm working. Okay, so it starts to predict different locations on your spread. So it's a really nice organizational tool, no matter what tool you're using, whether it be text, frames, the pen tool. It starts to predict those different locations. That'll become really helpful. Okay, if you want to create a perfect square, you guys can hold down Shift. This works very similar to a lot of the tools in the Adobe programs. If you hold down Shift, that allows you to keep a very perfect and proportionate image. Okay, so I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to drag that frame all the way to the corner, and it's going to snap to the other corner. Okay, and from here, what I'm going to do before I drop in my background image, okay, I've already downloaded a few of them, but feel free to go over and find a good background image. So I like to go to Creative Commons. It's not how you spell that. I find myself at the end of the day when I start typing, I just spell everything wrong. My fingers I just can't quite keep it together at late hours of the night. So let's go to Creative Commons, search the Commons. I'm going to do a country album. Okay, I like country music, so we'll do a country album today. So I use Flickr. You might search something. What's something that we always see in country albums? Trucks, barns, hay, a cold Bud Light. I'm not gonna incorporate that into my album cover, but just kind of joking around with that a little bit. But let's type in something like, let's type in old barn. All right. So some of these might work really well for the backdrop for the backdrop of my album covers. Okay, so these are all kind of they're all good images. So as you guys are creating your album cover, start to think about what you ultimately need to find to make it believable. Okay, so this kind of relates back to when we're creating our different compositions and our different images in Photoshop. Think about the different objects that you need for this to look like a real thing. Okay, so think about who your audience is. So this looks like a good one right here. I'm sure Kenny Chesney or any of those different people would probably love to be walking through this endless field of hay. Okay, so I'm going to download this photo. I'm going to take the original size. If your image needs a little post-production in Photoshop, feel free to take it in there and to enhance it if needed. Okay, I'm not going to do that for this particular one, but just actually kind of looking at it right now, the image is a little dull, so probably would benefit from going into Photoshop and spending 5 minutes and make the needed adjustments to make it a really nice image. Okay, so I am going to actually put that in my thumb drive. Okay, I'm going to put it here with my other images that I have found, and then from there I can go over. I'm going to click on that frame. Okay, I'm going to click on that frame, and I'm going to go over and go to File, Place. Okay, File, Place, and then I'm going to go find that image that I want. Okay, so week 6A content. Let's go to my album cover imagery, and let's find this one right here. Okay, so that's the image that I just found. So a lot of you guys probably ran into this problem where you bring in the image and it's absolutely gigantic. So actually, let me backtrack just a little bit. I'm going to place this image outside of the frame, and you can actually see how big that image actually is. So that's our album cover, and that's how big our image actually is. Okay, so that's actually what's happening, is it's placing the entire image into this tiny little frame, but it's not reducing the size and the scale. Okay, so let me just backtrack just a little bit more, and let's go through that process again. So again, I'm going to click on that frame. I'm going to go to File, Place, and whatever image I choose will insert into that frame. So what we need to do is we need to fit it accordingly to the media that we're working with. Okay, so let's look at our different options for fitting. Okay, I showed you guys one of them last time, but let's actually look at all of them and what each of those steps will do. Okay, so actually before I do that, let's look at really how the frame works. Okay, we talked a little bit about cropping. Okay, cropping is really easy in InDesign to where I can actually just simply reduce the edges of my frame to crop my image. Okay, so that's one way that you can do it. But if I double click on that frame, you'll notice that the color of that frame changes a little bit. We actually get an orange background that represents the outer perimeter of my image. Okay, and then from there I can actually move it around if I want to. Okay, I can move that image around within inside that frame. It's almost as if you literally have a picture frame and you have a larger image behind it, and you're just kind of moving it around until you get the image that you want. Okay, the problem with what we have now is that it's just so large for that frame that I'm never going to be able to get what I'm looking for. So if I right click on that and I go down to fitting, I have about a half dozen different options to which I could pick from. The one that I think usually works the best, but it may not always work the best, you may actually find differently today, is I usually go down to fit content to frame. Okay, so I'm going to fit content to frame, and but you'll notice about what happened with that is it actually compressed the image to fit in the frame. Okay, so for example, what we're doing right now, we actually have a perfect square for our image, or for our frame. Okay, and what that did, even though my image was actually not a or it was not a square, it actually compressed it to fit inside that frame. Okay, so that may or that may not be the desired outcome that you're looking for. For this particular image, yeah, no one could probably tell that the house is a little bit smaller, but depending on what it is that you're placing in there, you may not want that to be the desired outcome. Okay, so that's one. Let's go through and look at the other. So I'm going to click on that frame again. I'm going to right click, go to fitting, and let's do the first one. Let's click on fill frame proportionally. Okay, so right now it filled the frame proportionally, but I can't see the entirety of my image. If I double click on it, or if I click on it one time, you'll actually now see the image filled to that frame, but it's proportionate. It's not going to shrink it to fit that frame. This actually I take back my original statement in saying that that last one is probably going to be the desired outcome a lot. This will actually probably what you guys will want to do, because it doesn't stretch the image. Okay, so what that did is it filled the frame but proportionally, and from there I could click on, or I could double click on that image, and now I can actually move it around so that I can place whatever portion or whatever variation of the image that I want. Okay, so if I think of the rule of thirds, maybe I have my cabin on the right side of my image. Maybe it's on the left. Maybe it's centered. That's ultimately up to you to choose. Okay, but that right there keeps the image proportionate, but it at least reduces the scale so that it's manageable. It now fits within the frame that I just created. So I'm going to go ahead and move that. So I'm just using my arrows on my keyboard. I'm just going to move that image to make that cabin be on one side of the frame. Okay, because I'm going to put my good old friend Luke on the left side. Okay, so from there I'm going to click outside of the frame, and that's going to deactivate the frame. Okay, now if I click on that frame one time, I can move that frame around, and that image will stay in its place. Okay, so I'm no longer in the mode to where I can move around the image inside the frame. So I can move it to the center of my canvas, and if I want to crop it, I can continue to crop it if needed, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, so that's fill frame proportionally. All right, I am going to, let's look at some of our other options. It's going to be quicker to just create a new frame. Okay, so again, File, Place. I'm going to click on that same image. All right, let's right click on that. Let's click on Fitting. Let's click on Fill Content Proportionally, and let's see what we get a little bit differently. Okay, so now it has filled the entire image inside the frame, but proportionally. Okay, it's now showing me the entire image that I put in there inside that frame, but it's proportionate. Okay, but now it's a little bit different in that it's not filling the frame entirely. Okay, so this also may be a desired outcome that you might want. For me, I want the entirety of my background image to fill that entire frame, so that's not gonna exactly work for me. Okay, but you can see that might be an outcome that you might want. That put the entire image inside that frame. What you could do to get it to be a square again. So now that I have that entire image in there, I could reduce the extents of that frame. Okay, so I could have something like that. I could make it a square again. Okay, now I have a square again, but I could have created that, doing the original way that we filled that frame. Okay, so let's right click on this again. Let's look at some of the other different options. Fit frame to content. So let's see what happens there. That actually just changed our frame size to fit the content that we dropped in. Okay, that's not really what I want either, but you can see where maybe you drop in an image that you don't want to reduce the scale of it. Maybe it's exactly the scale that you want. You don't want to make it smaller, you don't want to make it larger, but you want your frame to fit the image that you brought in there. That would be the option that you want to choose. But I don't want that frame that large, because you can see that's probably about 24 by 36 inches. Okay, so let's go back and let's try a couple more. I won't do all of these. Okay, I'm just going to do maybe the first four. I'll let you guys look at the other ones. The last one is actually the first one that we did. Fit content to frame. That stretched all of your content that you originally placed within the frame, but it's no longer proportionate. Okay, so if proportion's not an issue, that could work really well from you. Any questions about those different fitting options inside the frame? Okay, the nice thing about frames is it doesn't always have to be a square. Okay, so the first one that we created was a rectangle, but you have other options. You have options like an ellipse, you have a polygon, so you can choose whatever type of frame that you want. Okay, so maybe you have multiple layers of your background. Let's say you wanted to create a frame of a circle. Okay, so let's just try this. I'm going to drag that circle to fill my album cover. I want it to go from edge to edge. I'm going to go to File, Place, and I'm going to put an image in there, and you can see that it works exactly like the rectangle. Okay, and from there I can go to Fitting, and I can select whatever option you think is correct. Okay, so fill frame proportionally. That might be a final outcome that you want to go after. Okay, so spend a few minutes today kind of experimenting with the different frame tools, the different shapes, and the different fitting options. Okay, because they all have different final outcomes. So let's get one that will actually work for my particular album cover. I am going to go ahead and choose a rectangle, and I'm going to place that original image in there. And I'm going to right click, fit, fill frame proportionally. and I'm going to double click that frame. I'm going to activate it, and I'm just going to move it to a position that I want. I'm going to click outside of the frame, and I can now place my next object. Okay, so I've already spent some time masking out the person that I want. Okay, so from there I'm going to go ahead and do File Place. I'm not going to create a frame for it this time. Okay, but I'm going to go to File Place. I'm going to click on my good friend Luke here, and I'm going to click on Open, and I'm just going to click on my screen. So right now he's a little bit large. Okay, so from here I can drag him to my album cover, and I'm going to hold down the Shift button, and I'm going to make him a little bit smaller. Okay, I'm holding down Shift because I want to keep the size of him proportionate. Okay, I'm going to make him about the size that I think he needs to be. Okay, right now basically I've just cropped him. Okay, that's all I've done is I've just trimmed my frame to crop him. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to click on Fitting, and I'm going to fill frame proportionally. Okay, and I'm going to kind of move him around to where I think that's the right spot. I think that looks pretty good. So if he's hanging off the edge of my original canvas that I created, that's okay, because InDesign will always only plot what's within inside that frame. If you're curious to know what that is, if you want to know what it's going to look like when you actually export it, you can go up to where it says View here. I'm going to click on View, and I'm going to go down to where it says Screen Mode, and I'm going to click on Preview. Okay, and by clicking on Preview, that shows you exactly what your file will look like when you export it. Okay, see how it's cutting off everything around what I had just created. Okay, so it's not showing me any of the content that maybe is hanging off the edge of my canvas. It's showing exactly how it's going to plot. So I'll do that one more time. Or let's go back to View, Screen Mode. I'm going to go to Normal. Okay, because InDesign gives you a nice big white spread. It gives you some boundaries to where you're working, but ultimately if you want to see what it is that's going to export, you're going to go over to Screen Mode and click on Preview. Okay, so I'm going to go backwards a little bit, Screen Mode, and Normal. Okay, if you guys ever run into the problem where something comes in really fuzzy, this actually is pretty good. It's not really coming in that, just a little bit. Okay, but if you ever notice anything is a little bit fuzzy, what you're going to do is you're going to click on the image that's fuzzy. You're going to right click, you're going to click on Display Performance, and you're going to click on High Quality Display. So by default you have the typical display. Okay, luckily the file size is actually fairly low for this particular image, so it's showing a fairly nice and high quality image. But sometimes you may see something like this where it comes in just kind of fuzzy. You can always right click on it, Display Performance, change it to high quality, and then it'll give you a nice crisp image. Okay, unfortunately I don't have any kind of bad quality images that I can show you exactly how that works, but I promise you as you guys start to work you will encounter that problem where something just looks a little fuzzy and you're wondering, why is my image so fuzzy? It's just because it's referencing that image from another location. Okay, that's the reason why it does that. So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about these idea of layers. Okay, so earlier we talked about layers and we talked about links. So right now if I click on layers, I only have one layer, and that's layer 1. So right now this wouldn't be the best file management system. Actually I'm not doing too bad yet, but I typically like to break my layers down into imagery, text, so on and so forth. Okay, so I might turn in layer 1. I'm going to right click, or let's see. I'm going to double click on layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and call this background images. Okay, and you'll notice next to where it says background images, you'll notice this tiny little blue rectangle. Okay, it's right here next to my cursor. That little blue rectangle actually refers to the color of the frame on your image. So if you look at Luke here, you'll notice that the color of his frame is also blue. that's telling me without looking at my layers panel right here, that tells me what that layer is on. Okay, so if that layer was red, that would tell me that's probably on the wrong layer. Okay, so that kind of allows you to process what layer your objects are on without actually clicking on the layers tab and going through and finding it and looking. Okay, so that's what that's referring to. And just like Photoshop, you have a little eyeball, you can turn them on and off. Right now, both of my images are on that background images layer. Okay, if I click on this little triangle right here, it's going to be a little drop down menu of the different objects that I have in my spread. Okay, and from there I can turn them on and off individually if needed. Okay, so that's a little bit about layers. I'm also going to create a new layer for my text, which I'm going to create in just a second. So I'm going to click on this little button right here. Notice that that little rectangle is now red. So when I actually start to create text, you'll notice that the frame around the text will now be red. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to, so I just double clicked on it. If you kind of do it slowly, it'll allow you to change the text without opening up the layer manager menu. But you can also double click on it like that. I can call this text. I can change that color to whatever I want. Okay, I'm going to leave it as red. That works for me. I'm going to hit OK, and now I have a couple different layers to which I can work on. Okay, so just like Photoshop, the layers that are on the top are going to be the topmost layers in your scene. Okay, so if I move my text right now, if I move my text layer below background images and I place some text on my screen, I won't be able to see it because it's behind my images. Okay, so usually most of the time the text is going to be on the uppermost layer. Okay, so right now with my text layer selected and I go over and I click on my text tool, I can create a frame for my text. Notice that frame is now red. That is corresponding to that little rectangle. Okay, and I could say something like Luke Bryan. So Luke Bryan. Okay, from there I can select that text. I can go up here to my horizontal ribbon up here, my contextual panel, and I can change things like my font. So maybe we make something that's a little bit bold and has a little bit of pop to it. So maybe something like, let's see. I'm actually going to create text that's white, and if you remember from I think a couple weeks ago I said white text that is on a real thin font, it won't work very well. We'll actually have a whole lecture on typography later, which I'll talk about that more. But if you're going to do white text, I'd recommend doing a nice bold font. So let's do something like this one right here. Okay, so that's Franklin Gothic Heavy. That works pretty well. I can change my font size to something maybe like 25. That's pretty good. Maybe do a little bit bigger. Let's try 35. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and I'm going to go over here to my text color. I'm going to change that to paper. Okay, and I'm going to click on my direct selection tool. I'm going to make my frame a little bit smaller. Just like our imagery, I can make that a little bit smaller. And obviously, if my frame gets too small, I'm not going to be able to see my entire text. Okay, so I usually like to make my frame just about the size of my text. All right, so I'm going to put that where I think is the best spot. I'm going to say about right there. I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to create maybe the name of my album. What should we call this album? I'll let you guys be the deciding factor of Luke Bryan's country album. Tight Pants. Luke Bryan. Tight Pants. It's a good one. Okay, so I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Maybe I make this not quite so heavy. So I'm going to type in F for Franklin. That will go ahead and jump my font right over to all of the F fonts. I'm going to say the medium one. Okay, reduce the size of my frame. I'll put that down here. All right, and that could be pretty good towards the end result of my country album. Okay. You might think about some of the other components of an album. You know, sometimes, you know, what are other things that you might see? You might see like a logo. You might see the parental advisory logo if you have explicit lyrics. So that might be something that you want to put on your album cover to give it some, you know, kind of some sense of reality, some sense of life. Okay, but you know, right here, I don't think Luke Bryan has any explicit lyrics. He's a pretty wholesome guy, so I'm not going to do that. But this might be a good example of what you might submit to me. Okay, we talked a little bit about layers. Let's talk again a little bit about links. Okay, so if you look at all of the objects that we have here on the screen, you're going to notice this little this little chain in the corner of my image. Okay, so if you look at these two images here, you'll see that little chain. If the chain looks the way that it looks right now, that means that your image is properly linked. Okay. The nice thing about InDesign is if I go and I change any of these images, for example, let's say I make some changes to Luke here, and in Photoshop, and then I resave that file. You'll notice that you get a little question mark here on the corner of that link. Okay, and by double clicking on that question mark, it'll automatically relink that content. Okay, and if I go over to the links panel on my page, if I click on links, you'll notice that it shows both of my images that I uploaded into InDesign right there. So if I'm going to click on one of those, and it's going to tell me all of the data that I could possibly imagine about that image. Okay, so that Luke Bryan image is 5.9 megabytes. It's a JPEG. It's one image. It tells you the pixel size, the density. But importantly, I'm going to go down to the path. Okay, so right here on that path, it tells me where it's stored. Okay, it's telling me that it's stored on my E drive, which is my thumb drive, and it tells me the location of where that image is. Okay, if I need to change that location, I can go up here, click on this button, and actually I take that back. That's not what that does. That actually just shows you where in your composition where that image is located. You might actually come to a point where you have like 15 or 20 images and you want to know which one is which. You can click on that and that will show you where that is. Okay, so those are going to be your different links. Any questions about how that might work? So if you ever don't see your image in your InDesign file, so you go home and you open up your file and it's just showing maybe like a big question mark, or you're not seeing your different media, it's likely because it can't find the link. One of the problems, maybe you saved that image to your desktop here at school and you didn't put it on your thumb drive. When you get home, it's not going to be able to find it and you're going to be in some trouble. So remember to always store the images that you have linked in a place that will always travel with that file. Okay?
So when you upload this, you'll have to upload however many files you use?
Nope. All you're going to do, and I'll go through that process right now, is you're just going to export it as a PDF. No need to export it as an InDesign file, but you're just going to export it as a PDF. So it'll be one compressed image. So from there, I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Adobe PDF Presets, and I'm going to go to High Quality Print. Okay. From there, I'm going to go to my thumb drive, Samsung. I'm going to go over to where I'm going to save it, week 6A, and I'm going to call this week 6A album cover. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep everything on the screen as is in the Adobe PDF Presets menu. All is good. pages is good. I'm going to go ahead and hit export. Okay, and if I go over to my different content, I could see that right here. So if I double click on it, I have a nice clean album cover, Luke Bryan tight pants. Okay, so I'll let you guys get started on that. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll continue on with InDesign a little bit more next class. I'll probably remember some things that I want to show you over the next hour. I'll probably shout them out and continue to show you additional little tips and tricks for InDesign. Any questions at all? All right, go ahead and get started. Let me know. I'll come around and talk to everybody. You can work on this. You could also work on assignment 2 if you want to. Either of those things will work just fine.
No, it smells like sulfur, but plastic.